There we go. Hi, everybody. Just let a couple of people join.
And we need to remember to hit record as well, Libby, when we get going.
Yeah, I think it records anyway.
I think it records itself.
Oh, is it
Yeah,
doing that
recording automatically.
Excellent.
There you go. Yeah, I'll give it another couple of minutes. Okay, I'll start with some intros then while the last few people filter in. So hi everybody, welcome. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Please put something in the chat if you cannot. But welcome to our webinar, Sports Psychology, Mindset for the Long Day Out. So for those who've joined our webinars previously, you'll know that Shane Oley, who's the CEO here at Ourea Events, usually heads these up, but he is partying in Europe currently. So myself and I'm the marketing manager at Ourea, and Ian Stewart, my colleague, who's the course manager at Ourea, have been unattended. So yeah, hopefully you'll be in for a good evening. I'm also joined by Vicky, Begg and Elanor Cormack from FitThink. I'll pass you over to Vicky and Elanor shortly to introduce themselves. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So yeah, I'll do a few intros. We'll dive right into some lots of questions all around the kind of key themes that we put in the sign up invite. If you do have any questions, obviously, as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat function. We'll probably pause at different points throughout the webinar and try and go through some of those and answer any questions that you might have. They usually last around 60 minutes or so. And Shane usually says if we do get cut off at any point, because it has happened before, then whoever is left remaining will be running the show. But hopefully that won't happen tonight. So yeah, without any further ado, I'll pass you over. Vicky, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, yeah. Thank you for having us. First of all, I'm Vicky Begg. My kind of background.
I know we already lost Vicky after
we lost Vicky.
That.
Oh well, shall I go?
Yeah, go on, Ellen.
Like elbowed her out the way. Yeah, so I'll let Vicky introduce herself when she comes back. I am part of FitThink, which is collaboration between myself and Vicky, that is the official psychology partner for Ourea Events. And I am a sport and exercise psychologist, and I work with quite a range of athletes, but particularly I do really enjoy working with the trail runners. There's kind of a lot to it, which is great, fun, and I like being outside myself, but don't run up mountains. Although, you know, I'm not ruling it out one day. But yeah, but my expertise comes from quite a lot of different areas around individual sports, around team sports, around exercise as well, and that being a slightly different dimension in terms of things like behavior change into exercise, things like that as well. So yeah, that's kind of me. But yeah, don't know if Vicky's reappearing. We'll give her some time. But, or we could just start with first question and Vicky can jump in. And just...
I do apologise. That was bad. Yeah. I think I'm in on my work Microsoft Teams system, and I think it maybe just kicked me out there for a minute. Anyway, fingers crossed. Yeah. So my background's actually in multi-discipline sports, triathlon. And I've kind of come to the sports psychology world through doing a master's several years ago, and right now I am just finishing off doing a diploma in counselling to tie together my sports psychology stuff with a kind of, I suppose, a practical sort of method of applying it with clients. Yeah, and Elanor and I kind of met through, I suppose, Stirling University, didn't we?
I think Stirling University, but I think it's through there's a network of sports psychologists in
SS.
Scotland that kind of get
Yeah.
together. So it was kind of through that. There's not that many of us, so it's quite a sociable place
Yeah.
where everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vicky, I did my intro while you were missing, so we're all good.
Thank you. Good.
And FitThink have worked with Ourea Events for a good number of years now, across it's mainly across our 2 expedition races, so Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath. So you guys take clients on looking to kind of improve their the mindset performance heading into those races.
Yeah,
That's
so we
correct.
started off just doing Dragon's Back, and then we expanded to Cape Wrath, and also now the Traverses as well. So anybody who's entered any of those can access special packages that give you kind of reduced rates on what it would be if you just did pay as you go for us. And you can work with either myself or Vicky, or a bit of both, because we bring slightly different expertise into it. So it kind of depends on what people are looking for.
Great. I'll pop the FitThink link in the chat for anyone who's interested later. So should we dive into the questions then? I guess I'll start just as the first kind of topic, I guess, preparing mentally for race day. So what can people do to integrate mental preparation into their kind of already busy and packed training schedules?
Who do you want to go for? Either or?
Whoever, yeah.
Shall I start and then I'll do a handoff?
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say about this is that you don't want to view it as an additional thing that you're doing. So it's not something you do separately. It's not something that should feel like an additional burden to your training schedule. It's much more about integrating it into it. So the starting point might be becoming more self-aware about what you're thinking. So actually, when you're out doing training, paying attention to what it is that you're thinking when you come to a difficult bit, or do you think differently going uphill and downhill? Is there certain weathers that you react to? That growing that self-awareness, and then starting to think about applying some of the strategies around it, or thinking about, well, actually, I've recognized a particular weakness maybe, or something you really want to develop and improve on, and go, okay, bit of focus support to do that. But it is really about integrating it into it, because you wouldn't kind of try and do anything else and just assume your brain knew how to do it, or just assume that my brain's not important when I'm doing this. It's obviously important to literally everything we do, from breathing upwards. So it's saying, well, actually, what I want to do is make sure my training, the way that I'm training, is optimal in terms of how I'm thinking as I train, because you're training your thinking as well at the same time, so that then when it comes to race day, you've got all those bits added together. Vicky?
Yeah.
To add anything?
Yeah, nice answer. And I think I would add to that with we think all the time. We're constantly thinking. And one of the things that we tend to revert to when we notice our thoughts are the rather unhelpful ones. We're really good at just getting on through our days if we're happy, and not really being especially engaged with that. We'll just be like, things are going really well. If you've been at work all day and things have been going great for you, you're generally not going to react to it. Usually what happens when our thinking pattern becomes a little bit disrupted, or it becomes distorted or unhelpful, or any of these sort of patterns that feel like they're negative, that's when we notice it. So it's almost about taking that sort of, again, what Elanor suggested, that sort of awareness around noticing when your triggers are and what it is that's actually setting you into that sort of maybe a bit of a spiral or something like that. But it's also good to notice actually when you're having a great day, because like I say, if you're able to balance it better and not always focus on the less good thoughts, it means that you're going to have a happier time of it and actually congratulate yourself when you ought to congratulate yourself for having a good day.
And the other thing that you can do if you're able to notice both good days and bad days, or good training runs and bad ones, is that you'll then be able to look at, okay, so what made that one good? What was different that day? What can I do more of on that, to give me more of that type of thinking, versus maybe comparing it with runs when you didn't feel as good or you didn't feel as motivated. What was different? Was it simply something to do with how much sleep you got? That had a knock-on effect? Was it through the time of day that you were running, and therefore you need to think about energy levels, or anything like that? But paying attention to both means you can optimize the good stuff and start to reduce the not so good stuff, and therefore give yourself a better chance of more good runs.
So if you're out on a training run and you start to feel less than enthusiastic about it, have you got any good tips for what to do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you can do, but primarily you want to make sure that you know why you're out for a run in the first place. One of the things that tends to lead to that kind of thing of, oh, just can't be bothered today, is that you're not entirely sure why you're doing it at that point in time. So is it about, you're training for an event, and that's fine, but if the event's quite distant, then that can be a bit problematic. So you want to have a few aims in between times. So thinking about, well, actually, is it that I'm doing this to improve a particular element of my running? And by improving that element of my running, I'll be able to, ultimately have a better chance at the event. But yeah, people sort of tend to stop at that point and say, well, that's why I'm going running. But actually, that's not the reason. Whenever I'm working, particularly with the trail runner, the ultra runners, and say, well, why is it you run? Nobody says I run because I want to do well at an event. That's not the reasons that anybody has ever given me. People say, oh, I love the adventure of it, or I like getting away from it all and it just gives me some headspace, or I like to challenge myself, or, I just like being in the outdoors and you get to go places that you wouldn't normally get to go. These are the drivers that keep you running. So if you're out for a run and you're out in the wild and you're starting to think, oh, not sure I can be bothered with this, you might pull on some of that. So saying, oh, I wonder what's around the next corner. If you're driven by a kind of curiosity for the outside world or for, new experiences, then go, okay, well, if I keep running, I'll get a new experience. So having that as your motivator is going to be much more useful than simply, I need to go training run because I want to do an event. If it's that you're doing the event for maybe a particularly personal reason, not a personal reason, but the one that really resonates with you, if you're doing it maybe in with a friend or in memory of somebody or something that's going to be quite an emotive driver, then that can be quite good as well to remind yourself of what's the ultimate reason you're doing it. But there's a lot of people who go for a run without thinking why they're going for a run that day. What's the aim of it? What's it going to get you? So focusing on what you're going to gain from being on the run can then help you sort of come back into, right, okay, right, no, that's why I want to keep going, because I want to achieve that, rather than I'm going for a run on a Tuesday because I always go for a run on a Tuesday. that won't be enough on a quite often
Tuesdays.
on a dark, miserable Tuesday.
Dark wet Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When it comes to big things like this, I always find the why do we do it thing is a question that sort of 3 or 4 days into an event when I'm quite tired and have been going a long time, I seem to magically have this really well articulated answer for, which as soon as I've finished the event, I can never quite bring up again. But the way you've described that, they're thinking about why you do the training runs in between, I think is really important as well, because then, particularly with things like Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back, they're such huge goals that often people put it in their sort of diary 2 years in advance, 3 years in advance, or even more. So just saying, I'm doing this wet Tuesday night training run because I want to do Dragon's Back someday, is quite an ambiguous thing, isn't it? So I think, like you say, having in the way that we would break down the training plan so that you're for that month or 6 months or whatever, you're working on a particular aspect of your running. It really makes a lot of sense actually when you talk about that being pairing your mental preparation with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a classic sort of it's sort of coaching, I suppose, mechanism whereby you're distributing not only your effort in terms of your physical effort, but you're almost distributing your psychological effort in some way as well. It can't all be focused on that enormous main goal, like you're saying, Ian, at the end of it all. It has to be focused on smaller things that are happening, so that each day and each event and each session that you do is then also broken down into separate little portions and separate little bits and bobs and things to do, and making sure that it feels like you're almost because these are such big events that people are entering, that they're actually living it. They're not just doing it, they're living it, and we like to live our lives and enjoy our lives, and if you're not living it, but you're just doing it, then it feels maybe sort of challenging to engage fully with it.
And the other part of that, I think, is that doing something like Cape Wrath isn't about the few days you spend doing Cape Wrath. It's about the whole experience. So you want to be viewing it as, the reason I do this whole thing is because whatever the reason is, because I really want a challenge, or, I want to see myself getting better at something. That might be a part of it. But you want to be experiencing it, all of those moments through it, not just have your training section, which will be the biggest section by a long way. You don't want that simply to be about doing the run, doing the event. You want that to be part of actually this whole package, that yes, the end point might be doing the event, but it might not be. You might never get there. So if you don't get to the start line for whatever reason, you don't want that to be that's negated everything that you did before that. So it's kind of trying to change your perspective into, I'm not training for an event, I'm training for some other reason, part of which is doing an event. And then it takes the pressure off a little bit as well, in terms of, if you get an injury or something and you might not be able to do the event, it doesn't mean everything else was wasted.
Yeah. I mean, I quite often would make the sort of comparison maybe with athletes or clients, that let's say you started to learn how to do a job, or you started on a degree course, if that was one of your aims in life. There's the end game, but you have to process everything in between to get to that end game. And the scale of these events is so significant that it really does involve that kind of level of commitment, whereby it is like a way of living, and it's something that you want to really sort of, I don't know, just kind of live, breathe, bring into your life, and be comfortable with it.
I've referred a lot to, it's kind of on the goals theme, I guess, like process goals versus outcome goals. And I kind of tend to primarily do that around races, but I do think that there's an element that's useful for training as well, which kind of feeds in. I don't know if that's something that either of you recommend to people or discuss with people in your kind of clinics.
Yeah, 100%. What you don't want to have is just an outcome goal, which would be, for those that aren't familiar, would just be kind of what it sounds like, but the end point, the thing you're trying to get to. You want to have lots of steps along the way, so you can have process goals, which are much more focused on what you're actually going to do. So what is the process that will get you closer to it? So that might be something about the type of training you're going to do. It could be speaking to myself or Vicky, that could be part of a process of improvement, something like that. But you can also have performance goals, which are much more about reaching a particular level. And you'll probably be doing that as part of your training. You'll probably have aims of timings and, elements like that. But what you want, if you think of it like it's a a ladder, and the top rung of the ladder is your outcome goal. Now, your outcome goal might not be completing the race. Your outcome goal might be something much more controllable. It could be completing the race, and that's not a bad one, but it could be something more controllable, just about, actually getting fit enough to be able to potentially complete the race. That could be the achievement in itself. But the other rungs on the ladder are how you get there. And if you don't have those rungs, then how are you going to get to the top? It's, you can't just hold the ladder and climb to the top one with nothing in between. So you do need those there. And people tend to be, I'm going to say, average in the middle of, like, they have a kind of idea of, like, oh, I should set some goals, but then they set lots and lots of outcome goals. If I want to do that, and then I want to do that, and then I want to do that, and it's like, well, how are you doing any of those? How are you getting to any of those? And the process of goal setting itself, I mean, that could be one of your process goals is, I'm going to set some goals. But the act of doing that tends to help people to kind of think a bit more clearly about what they're trying to do and why they're doing it and how they're going to do it. But then it also helps you to evaluate along the way. So you're evaluating yourself on the basis of on your process goals that you're trying to achieve, rather than on, have I done that one thing yet? So you could do all your process goals and maybe still not quite reach the top of the ladder, but it doesn't mean you failed because you've done all of these things on the way. Vicky, you do quite a lot of goal setting, don't you?
I do, yeah, a lot of goal setting, and it sits both in my kind of coaching world and in the CBT world. It's often used in the counselling sort of arena as well. And it just, they feed so easily into one another. The classic SMART goal setting system, where you're looking at how specific it is, you're looking at whether it's measured, you're looking at whether it's achievable, whether it's relevant to you and realistic to you, and then whether it's time measured. And those are just absolute classics of either coaching or the sort of therapy world. And as soon as you start to think your way through what those actually mean and how personal they are to you, they just make sense. It makes so much sense to work on a process-based system. There are very few of us who are fully focused on the outcome, because ultimately the outcome might be something like, yeah, a podium place, or the medal, or the finish. And a lot, most humans, most people are, as Elanor suggests, somewhere in the middle. We're a bit extrinsic and intrinsic. We like a bit of both things going on in our world. So we like to have the kind of process going along, as long as we can see that there's also an end goal that might be really satisfying, and we'd quite like to have the medal as well. Just depends on what floats your boat. Not everybody's a medal winner. Not everybody's competitive. So it's like trying to work out what it is that floats your boat in terms of your goals. That kind of leads me on to, actually, so one of the other sort of ideas that we'd had when we were coming up with the webinar themes, and that is, like, if you've got like process-based or outcome-based goals, and you're ultimately sort of saying, well, I only ever want to win something, are you saying that because your pals say it, because your peer group says it? Are you saying it because you think that's what you should be saying? But working out what it is you really enjoy is quite important to establishing what your goals are going to be. I don't know if I explained that well.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me wonder also then about the idea of, when you're setting those goals, what are people sort of visualizing? What are they thinking about when they're setting those goals? So are you just thinking about getting to the lighthouse or the castle if you're in Cardiff? So when you work with people, do you get people doing different visualizations? And what sort of bits do you get people to focus on in that process?
I'll start on that. most of my clients don't even get as far as thinking about visualization, and that's definitely something that we spend a bit of time on. Yes, they might have seen the picture, a picture on a website, or whatever it is that's kind of sparked their imagination. But if I ask my clients or sort of dig into their visualization process, they're often not doing it. They're not actually seeing that. They're not picturing themselves. They're usually picturing somebody else doing that, because that's often what you see. So your experience is based on what you've seen of other people doing, and it's often not you. So practicing that is a big thing. Practicing putting yourself in those different places throughout the race is something that's really worth trying.
Yeah, and I think that using imagery for motivational purposes can be quite useful in terms of viewing yourself finishing. But again, if you're only using it for that, everything's still focused towards that end point.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often it can be, I'm not going to say more useful, but possibly more useful, to use it to help you along the way.
Absolutely.
So to think about, if there's something about the race that you find maybe particularly scary, actually, can you practice imagery of you doing that and feeling confident when you're doing it and feeling calm when you're doing it, and using imagery in that way to teach your brain that it's okay to do what you previously maybe were quite anxious about or quite scared about. Whether that's actually, I find, going downhill is really, really terrifying. Well, if that's what you've repeatedly been telling your brain, then it's going to preempt that and be terrified before you do it. Whereas you can use imagery to retrain that a bit, to trick your brain into thinking it's done it lots of times in a much calmer way, and therefore when you get to doing it, you'll be calmer because your brain doesn't, it thinks, so I've done this, it's fine, I'm confident in this, I've practiced it loads. So you can use imagery in lots of ways. And again, thinking about, well, actually, if you're breaking down your race, you're breaking it down into, well, actually, what are all the things that are going on? Are there particular parts of it that you want to use as motivational imagery? So you want to go, actually, I really want to be on top of that peak. I think that would be wonderful to have that feeling. Okay, so what do we think that would feel like? How can we use that as a driver to get you up to the top? If you've had a really good experience doing something, can we capture that and use that feeling as the imagery to keep you going, rather than it just all being about crossing the finish line? So again, it's kind of actually, can we bring it back a bit from the finish line? Can we break it down and have things to keep you going and to help you to get to the finish line? That's still always the or usually the purpose, the aim, but it's much more about what are the things that are going to help you to get there, rather than just that one image of actually crossing it. And also, a lot of people have no idea what it would feel like to cross the line because they've never done it. So it becomes quite difficult, as Vicky was saying, to imagine yourself doing it. Because they're going, well, would I be absolutely shattered? Would I be emotional? Would I just be numb? What's that actually going to feel like? And then you can kind of come up against the problem then that it doesn't fulfill what you thought it should feel like. If your imagery crossing the line is all about feeling amazing and having a rush and, just all your friends and family being there and it being wonderful, and actually you sort of stumble over it in a haze and you can't even really remember it because you're so tired, after the race you're then like, well, that wasn't what I wanted. I haven't got what I wanted, because if it's been so focused on having that one feeling, as opposed to, again, seeing the race as a whole as the experience and experiencing it along the way and having lots of different experiences, some of which will be really positive and you might get a high from, some of which will be really hard, but maybe that's the point, because if it was easy you wouldn't be doing it. But actually having this sort of package of experiences that are your race, rather than that one experience at the end that has to live up to everything.
I listened to a podcast with, slightly off topic, but with Alex Honnold, where he said he visualized the entire of the free solo climb beforehand, so he knew exactly where to put his hands and everything while he was doing it. So if So if people have set their goals and they kind of have that in mind, and during the race, inevitably one of their goals doesn't go to plan, as you're saying, Eleanor, do you have like kind of tactics or things that people can like tools that people can use to help them kind of overcome those moments in the race and not just think like, oh, that's it, I can't do it, and I'm going to kind of throw the towel in?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there will, in any of these sorts of races, it will not go completely to perfect plan. It just won't. There'll be something, possibly lots of things. So pre-planning is a big part of it. So you would plan for lots of other scenarios. So you want to also plan for some of those kind of mental scenarios, or things that are practical, but you want to plan for how you will react to them mentally. So I quite often use a if what plan. So as in, if this happens, what will I do? And there's two benefits to that. One is that you have a plan, so if you are, let's say you're way behind your time, your planned time for whatever reason. So if I'm like that, what am I going to do? And so you have that already in place. And that can be really useful, particularly when you're sleep deprived, because it removes some of the need for decision making. Can be quite hard to make non-emotive decisions when you're in those scenarios. Whereas if you've got it pre-planned, you go, oh, I've already thought about this. I trust myself because I thought about it when I was alert and, able to make decisions. So I'm going to go with my plan. So that can be really useful from that point of view. But the other thing that can be really useful doing that is that it can remove some of the anxiety about what if that happens. So even if it never happens, people can run a whole race worried about something happening. What will I do if that happens? What will I do if I don't know, fall in a river? What will I do if I get injured? What will I do if, I don't have enough snacks? Whatever. And actually having the plan in place means that you can let that worry go, because I've dealt with it. I've been through and I've thought of all the things that might happen, the potential, things that are maybe likely to happen or not likely, but if they did happen, would need quite a serious response. And they've done an if what plan for all of those. It means you can kind of close that off and say, right, I've done my prep for the kind of unforeseen circumstances. And therefore, if they pop up, I just refer to my plan, because I've already done that. I don't need to spend the whole time worrying about them happening. Because if you go into a race with only a plan for it going well, it's not going to match what is about to happen. Because as I say, there will always be something will happen. And sometimes that might be, oh, I'm going faster than I thought. Oh God, let me have a panic about going too fast. But you can build that into your plan as well. Well, what do I do if I seem to be going faster? Do I just keep going? Do I pause? Do I check something? What do I do in that? So it's not all sort of disaster planning. It's about the little things that might make a difference as you go along.
The other
Vicky,
thing that will, oh, go on,
No,
yeah,
you
Vicky,
go.
if you want to jump in.
No, on you go, Ian.
The other thing that will inevitably happen to everybody on one of our expedition races is pain.
Yep.
I don't know if we put that on the website, but it is going to happen at some point over an 8-day or 6-day mountain race. So if you got, and this is, I could quiz you for hours on this topic actually, so I'll try not to get too carried away. But have you got a good way for people to deal with pain? But then also, how do we separate that pain that is totally manageable that they should? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but somehow kind of fight through versus separating that from pain that's bad.
Vicky, do you want to go? Or will I jump in?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go on that one. I mean, I think, as you described there, Ian, the first thing for athletes to sort of consider is, what pain actually is. So the pain's usually it's a signal, it's an alarm bell. It's something that's letting you know there's either something wrong or maybe you're doing something which is stressing your body in some way. And if you think about those different sort of explanations for it, and you're rational about it, which can be challenging when you're in an event like, you know, the ultra endurance events. If you understand that pain is apportioned to the activity that you're doing, and that there's going to be a level of pain pretty much all the time, and you're familiar with that, especially through your training expeditions, I suppose having your own set of measures about pain could be a really useful starting point, and almost sort of, you know, being quite kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost having a kind of hierarchy where you understand what levels of pain you're actually working with, and actually outlining that in your own terms, or with, for example, myself and Elanor, and saying, okay, what does this kind of pain mean to me? What does that kind of pain mean to me? And when am I experiencing those things? When is the alarm really an alarm that I need to stop? You know, what is it that's actually going on here? And, you know, am I going to do myself damage by continuing in this situation, and working out then what your safety plan is in terms of pain from which you cannot recover? You know, so it's almost like looking at how you establish your own kind of hierarchy and work out which areas of pain you are willing to tolerate, bearing in mind that that's really individual. I can imagine that the majority of people who are doing the events, all you amazing athletes who have joined this call, are fairly used to pain. So it's almost about working out what your hierarchy of pain actually is, and knowing that beforehand, so that you can actually say, no, it's gone beyond that now, and I need to actually stop and deal with this and get the medical team involved. And, you know, yeah, that would be my idea there.
Yeah, and I think kind of to add on to that is that what we're kind of talking about, the way sometimes classify it, and this is what we did with Shane when he was doing his drags back, was about good pain and bad pain. And about, he has a thing where he talks about, you know, should I be bothered? You know, so what we did was build it so that he had check-in points where he checked in with the pain to check that it wasn't something he needed to address anything with, or it wasn't injury and he needed to stop, you know. But beyond that, that was good pain, because he was doing something really hard, and you guys are doing something really physically hard. It's meant to come with pain. That's a guarantee, as Ian says. That is part of the experience. So actually, if you're doing it and you're not in pain, that would probably imply you're going really, really slow. You know, or you've I don't know, missed half the course or something. So that idea of actually, you know, can you differentiate between the two, and can you have a system that you check in, but once you've finished the check-in, you then close it off. Because one of the really important things to remember about pain is that pain, the way we experience pain, is subjective. So everybody will experience pain differently. You can experience the same injury and the you know, or the same level of, your body can be damaged in the same way, but you can experience that pain very differently. So there's things that you can do to come away, or to reduce what you're experiencing. Essentially, you can't necessarily get rid of it, but you can certainly reduce it. So, you know, some simple things like distraction. So rather than focusing on the pain, if you focus on pain, it will feel more painful. So if you're, the idea of doing the check-in is that you can stop focusing on it. You focus on it for a wee minute, you check in with it, make sure it's not anything you need to deal with. If it is, you deal with it. If it's not, you leave it alone, and then you move your focus somewhere else. So whether that's looking about you, whether that's singing a song, doesn't really matter. The other thing that you can do, which helps, is to smile. Now that might seem odd, but the reaction of smiling changes your brain chemistry, and therefore you feel less pain. So having something on hand, that whether it's your favorite joke or a nice memory or something that you can pull on to think about, or singing a cheery song, you know, anything like that, but the act of smiling. So you can do things like have it where, one of the things we did with Shane was that he had to make sure that he said thank you to any people, any supporters that were there. Well, that was the aim. I don't know whether you said thank you to them all, but you know, if he passed anybody, because if you say thank you to somebody, you'll kind of smile when you're doing it, and it was a way to drop in all these little points of smiling when you might not have felt like smiling that much. So you can artificially build them. It's not that you have to feel happy. That's not what we're doing, but it's the physical act of smiling that then sets that off. So you can do things like that to manage what is, as I say, it is subjective. So you want to focus on it when it's important, check in with it. Is it okay? Am I still okay to keep running? And as Vicky said, doing some prep on that as to where are your red lines on it, possibly. But once you've done that, you don't need to focus on it anymore. It can just exist in the background or the foreground, but you still don't need to focus on it. And then you can take those, you know, put in little measures to help you to move away. But realistically, it's accepting that, and that will affect subjectivity as well, is accepting that you're doing something that will come with pain. And the more willing you are to accept that, the less you're going to feel the same pain. Yeah. If it comes along and it's a surprise to you, then you're going to feel more distressed about it and you're going to focus on it more. But yeah, you definitely want to be going, well, why am I doing this? If you're doing it because you want to do something really hard, which I think is probably in everybody's why somewhere when you're doing these types of races, is, you know, there's a challenge element to it. To get that level of challenge, you need the pain to go with it, because otherwise you're not getting that level of challenge. So they're intricately coupled together. You can't have one without the other. So you can kind of accept that of going, okay, if I want the challenge, if I really want the challenge, I need to be willing to have the pain. And that in itself then means you're not struggling with the pain. You're not sort of battling against it. It's just part of the whole experience.
When I first ran Cape Wrath in 2018, I was pretty well broken by the end of day 4, and I set off on day 5 feeling pretty miserable, until I had the realization that I've signed up for something hard. Don't be surprised when it's hard. And laughing about that, going up the hill, totally changed the next 4 days for me. It made a big difference.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's
So
also worth mentioning,
and it's amazing.
And reappraised.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning at this point that within camp we've got amazing medical teams. So if you're not sure if you should stop or not, they won't. They'll give you a very different level of care and sympathy than you would get if you went to your GP, who would probably put most of our runners into A&E by day 5 if they saw them hobbling through the gates. But they're very good with lots of experience, so they're a good person to go and ask if you're not sure. We've got a great question in from Jeff in the chat as well. I'll just jump into that while we're at it to take us on to the next stage. He says he's been through enough events to know what to expect during the run and tend not to worry about it too much. But the morning before the event is a nightmare. He ties himself in knots with nervousness and rarely arrive on the start line calm. How do I manage the morning before Shane says go? Great question.
I suspect he's not alone. You go, Vicky.
Yeah. You're definitely not alone with that one. One of the questions I would sort of have for Jeff is, I suppose, do you practice that sort of visualization of being on the start line and that imagery that goes along with being in the start line, and do you practice almost working yourself back from the start line? What I'll quite often do with athletes who suffer, it's almost like performance anxiety. It's almost like sort of putting an itinerary in place that works back from the start, and it's time-based, and it involves really breaking down everything that's happening in that space before the event. There is the race start, and we do tend to focus a little bit on that, a little bit like the kind of outcome goal thing. We're so focused on the start that we forget about the fact that we've actually got to get to the start. And I'll often do like a timeline with athletes where we literally go from, let's say your event starts at 6 a.m. You know, what's actually happening before that from almost 24 or 48 hours in advance, and how is that time divided up. And quite literally, I'll do things with clients where we're saying, well, do you actually know where the toilets are? And are you going to have a mad panic 2 minutes before the starter gun and race around like a lunatic trying to find the last piece of equipment that you thought you had, but that you've actually put it down somewhere? So prepping yourself with knowledge about that phase and that sort of situation and all those experiences that are going to come your way before the event really helps you to deal with that sort of nervousness, because it is just literally preparation, and it's almost like this is part of your event. It's not an add-on, it's very much part of it. And you know, taking yourself through the sleep the night before, driving to the event. What if you have a bit of a disaster getting there? All these little bits and bobs. And it's amazing how detailed you can become, sort of having a look at things that might happen, that might go wrong, and just a bit like the ifs and buts in Eleanor's if and what method. You're basically preparing yourself for all the little bits and bobs that might happen, including I need a pee 2 minutes before the start gun is going to go off. Where are the toilets?
Yeah.
A good thing, oh sorry, I was going to say a good thing to add there with our multi-day races, and this isn't obviously from a psychological perspective, but we, aside from the first day, we have like flexi starts as well. So people, let's say the window at Dragon's Back, I can't remember, is like 6 till 8. You have full control over that window then, as in like, it's not like you're kind of like you said, rushing and you're like, oh no, now I need a wee, or oh now I need to do this. You have the time to do that, and then you can obviously set off on your own schedule, which I think people find quite good as the race progresses. Sorry, Ellen, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's fine. I would add to that, something that I've come up again with clients linked into that, is that having a morning plan during the race is really good because it avoids faff. And the ability to have a flexible start can mean that people faff right up until the end point of it. And if you're somebody who's going to be tight on cutoffs, then that 15 minutes of extra faff could be the difference. So actually having a morning plan as well of, well, actually, what do I need to do? What are the critical things? What's the order I do things in when I get up in camp? When am I aiming to leave? Yes, it's okay if I'm a little bit later, but actually, when am I planning on leaving, and how do I plan backwards from that to everything that needs to happen? And even to the point of, yes, camp, nice sociable place, but that doesn't mean you have to talk to everybody. And it should be perfectly okay to say, I'm on a schedule, I don't have time for a chat just now, I'll speak to you tonight, or whatever, that sort of thing, of getting away with that. The other thing to say on the nerve side of it is that part of how we react to them is also about how we interpret them. So if you're feeling nervous, Jeff, or anybody else, you can be okay with feeling nervous. You don't have to worry about feeling nervous. If you worry about feeling nervous, you're going to feel more nervous and you're going to get more panicky. It's like, oh, why am I nervous? I'm nervous because I've forgotten things. I'm probably nervous because I've forgotten it. Oh, I'm never going to be able to do this because I forgot. Oh, no, it's terrible. Oh, God. Right? So your heart rate's woof. As opposed to feeling a bit nervous. Okay, I'm about to do something quite exciting and quite big. That seems like an appropriate response. Right, okay. Now I'll get on with doing what I've got in my plan because I was with Vicky and I made a nice plan. I'll just carry on doing that rather than taking the nerves, kind of similar to pain, rather than taking the nerves and pushing them to the fore and letting them kind of run the show. You can be nervous and still calm and functional and get on with what you're doing rather than, letting the nerves kind of run away a bit. Oh, yeah. I think it's a couple more questions. I don't know if we want to dive in there.
Yeah, that's the last one that's just popped in there. Is sort of feels linked to that, talking about the start line and things. Joe has asked, have you got any observations on what people might call imposter syndrome? So milling around at registration and everyone looks like supremo athletes. I'm just an ordinary Joe, says Joe. What am I doing here? Feelings. Yeah, one of the things I like about our events actually is that I think on the start line or registration, it's actually really hard to pick out who's going to do well or not through the race, because they're such big events that it's not just a 5 or a 10K where you could probably have a pretty good guess. But yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm just going to say two slightly brief things. Well, brief for me. We'll see where it goes. The first one is that you've got yourself to the start line. So nobody on that start line is ordinary. I can tell you that. If we class ordinary as the average in society, they're not on that start line. So you're already at the start line. You deserve to be at the start line. You put the work in to be at the start line. So you are part of that group. So there's that side of it. The second side of it is you have absolutely no idea what everybody else is thinking. And the classic in imposter syndrome is that you're assuming everybody else isn't thinking the same thing. Or everybody else, they look confident, so they must be confident. That's us making stuff up. We don't know that. So instead of worrying about what you think everybody else is thinking or how they're feeling, just come back to what you've done. Come back to, I've done my prep. I've got myself here. I'm ready to go. You're running your race. You're not running their race anyway. So even if you are at the back of the pack, doesn't matter. Unless you're trying, unless you are somebody that's trying to aim for the podium. Otherwise, doesn't matter. Run your race. What they do is irrelevant, really. Vicky?
Yeah. I mean, and I would sort of say there. I mean, what you've kind of got going on there is a bit of a sort of it's a classic unhelpful thinking where you're kind of dismissing the positives, you're dismissing your own positives, and you're probably at the same time making unfounded judgments about everybody else, exactly as Eleanor sort of described there. And I think coming back into a sort of slightly more rational mindset, switching off your own personal judgments about everybody else. Just because somebody's got a cool matching outfit on doesn't mean anything other than that. They've just got a cool matching outfit on. They maybe just like that kind of thing. As compared to, somebody whose outfit is thoroughly not matching. If you're making judgments about, other people based on, how they look, if they look supremo, it's just a little bit of a sort of your brain kind of playing tricks on you there. And if you sort of do as Eleanor suggested and kind of come back into your own training program and say, well, what have I actually done? How did I get myself to be here? And do your checklist of kind of almost like competencies, skills, knowledge, all the things that make up your personal profile of how you've managed to get to that race start. Then you'll start ticking off all the things that you need to know about yourself to be good to go.
One of the questions that I'd kind of thought of before related to confidence building is if somebody has taken on one of our races before, Dragon's Back, Cape Wrath, and not had a good experience, i.e. they didn't, complete the race or didn't get to the kind of goals that they wanted, how can they, do you have any tips for them kind of coming back, or if they are a bit nervous about signing up again because they took kind of a hit previously? Do you get a lot of that in the clinic, or?
Yeah, that can be a challenge for people. What I would tend to do is to focus on all the things they learned from the first attempt. So differentiating the two. So they are two entirely different scenarios. The only thing that's consistent is the route, essentially. But saying, okay, so the last time I did it, have a look at why didn't you finish? Hopefully you've changed something. So was it to do with the way you fueled yourself? Was it to do with your pace? Have you practiced a particular element of it? Have you got faster uphill? Whatever it is. But really looking at what did I learn? Because actually what you've got is way more knowledge about the race, way more knowledge about the route, way more knowledge about yourself in that situation. And therefore you're already in a better place to go and do it again because you've done it once. So you know what to expect, you've got all these things, but not just don't just acknowledge that, but actually look at, okay, what are the really practical things that I've then learned and I can now apply? And then over time, you're then looking at using that to build confidence of actually look at the difference between me now and me then. It doesn't mean that going and doing it again will be right for everybody. And ultimately, you probably won't know the answer to that until you've gone and done it. So there is a bit of that about it. But you can certainly look at, if nothing has changed since the last time you did it and you didn't manage to do it, you wouldn't be massively confident about getting a better outcome. So you're saying, well, you need to change something. So what have you learned? What are you going to change? And therefore, drawing on that for your confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. If I was thinking, if I'm taking sort of what Elanor said there, and if you're finding that what your let's call it like mental filter or your mental leaning in that situation is to go to the "but I failed" side of it, then ultimately what we would want to do as well is to look at where that filter is taking you, and why you're sort of leaning towards that more negative filter, and sort of, is it, look, that you think that because you failed once you'll always fail again, and are you then forming your beliefs around the experience on that first experience only, and not giving yourself space, as Eleanor's suggesting, to develop and take the opportunity to move forwards into a more positive outlook, and shifting that sort of, call it, grey mental filter that you've maybe put over things, as a result of the of not finishing.
Yeah. And the other thing is to do with linking back to when we're talking about goal setting. If you've set goals along the way, then failing one of them, i.e. one of them being to finish, doesn't mean everything else failed. So you don't want to dismiss everything else you did because you didn't finish. So having those goals in place to start with then helps you to manage in the event of not managing to finish the race. It lets you evaluate more rationally what you did succeed at. You could have got right, within a mile of the end of the race and then just had an injury that meant you had to stop. Well, it doesn't mean you failed. That means you got really near the end of the race and had an injury that meant you had to stop. That's all that means. So yeah, it lets you evaluate it in a much more rational way rather than the only goal being finishing. And if I don't do that, the whole thing's a failure. We've got another question I don't want to miss out. It's from Fiona, just relating to pain, saying, do you have any tips on dealing with psychosomatic pain after a healed injury, and maybe how to identify that type of pain, particularly if it crops up during an event or a long training run where things already hurt? Thoughts, Vicky?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought with that one, with the sort of say psychosomatic symptoms, is a little bit along the lines of, again, what your brain is likely to be doing in that situation, and there's almost like a little bit of kind of, call it, psychoeducation would go behind or along with this, is that what your brain is doing is it's almost protecting you from the potential of something that might happen that's similar to what happened before, where you incurred the injury. And it helps you to understand that because your brain's just wanting to protect you, it's almost creating those signals to say, oh, this might hurt, this might hurt. So you start to think, oh, I'm feeling this pain, or I'm sort of getting those kind of symptoms of pain coming through. The reality of the pain, given that what you've described there, Fiona, is a healed injury, mightn't necessarily be as extreme as you are genuinely probably experiencing. It's just that your body your brain and your body are sort of getting the signals a little bit mixed up, because your brain's saying, I need to protect you and keep you safe from this. And that will have a knock-on effect on your behaviour. So you'll maybe rein in your running, for example. You'll not run as hard because you know that you think that might hurt. So the process of the previous experience, forming your beliefs about it, then having consequences tends to just be a process. So it's almost like about how we can untrain that from happening.
Yeah, so I would say as part of that, you want to make sure you have tested the injury ahead of time and using not just for practical reasons, but then that can give you the confidence that actually this isn't something I need to worry about. Because you're having a similar situation as with any pain, where if you go looking for it, your brain will, as Vicky said, it's a little bit skewed anyway. It'll find it if you go looking for it. You know, if you sort of stare at your arm long enough going, does my arm hurt? Well, yes, it will now, because you've just told it should hurt. So it's that of going, actually, if you can be confident that it's healed, and you can do some work around that of like, oh, what are all the things that I've done that tell me that it's healed? What's all the work I've done to strengthen it? Putting those into your kind of bucket of positivity about your injury, then you're less likely to have it cropping up. In the moment, I think you said in your question as well, sorry, I've turned chat off, about, how do you differentiate between that and real pain? To a certain extent, you probably don't need to, because it still comes down to the same thing of, well, actually, is it something I need to deal with right now? So knowing that if you have a weakness from a previous injury, it might crop up. Well, okay. That's okay. That would be expected. Is there a management aspect to it? Maybe. Some people find it, it reassuring, they maybe pre-tape things up, or something like that, which is much more, sometimes it's about the reality of the injury, but quite often it's a reassurance thing of going, well, I've already covered that off, I've sorted that, it'll be fine, rather than having to worry about it coming up later on. So I say you kind of want to work much more into getting your headspace in a place where it's confident that that is not something you need to worry about, which will then mean the psychosomatic aspect is less likely to come up later on, and you can kind of trust your pain signals a wee bit more at that point. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I had another question actually. I've heard people kind of coming up with mantras and like positive cues and things for themselves during the races. Do you think there is much truth in like having a mantra or having something like that you carry with you on race day?
Mantras themselves are neither good nor bad. It depends what the mantra means and what it stands for and what sits behind it. So just coming up with a mantra because it sounds cool, I mean, there's no harm in it. It might make you feel good a little bit if it's entertaining, but it's not really doing anything. But you'll be one of those people on the start line saying a cool mantra to yourself and, scaring Joe. But it mantras should be the outcome of some thinking that came before it. As in, are they there to remind you of something particular, a particular strength that you've already established that you have? Are they there as a reminder around how you're going to deal with particular scenarios or difficult scenarios, as a whole? Is it about making you feel confident? Usually it's about confidence, something like that. Motivation or confidence would be the kind of two areas I would see it as. But yeah, you want something sitting behind it. You don't just want to come up with something that sounds cool. You can do it a little bit backwards in that some people might come up with an idea and then you can work it backwards to make sure that it's got a substance to it. But yeah, they're not bad at all, and they can be really, really useful if they are more than just the words. Vicky, would you agree?
Yeah, that was funny, Elanor. Yeah, I
Oh,
think
there we go. JP's leapt in with his mantra. It's her mantra.
trust,
Sorry, their mantra.
trust or have trust. Oh, that's quite a deep one.
That is quite deep.
Yeah, I think one of the things I actually learned from one of the clients I worked with last year, actually, who did Cape Wrath, when it wasn't so much mantra work, we were working on him just being better to himself. So the the self-talk that we sort of focused on and he was learning to use was just way kinder than it ever was. And that's not in a smushy kind of queasy kind of a way. It was more that he was just being a bit more kind of real about things, and rather than sort of being harsh and maybe having that sort of swearing to himself about, I don't know, tripping up over something. It changed into, oh, look, it's okay. It's fine. Everybody else has probably tripped up over that, thing, whatever it was, and just sort of being that little bit more rational. So not necessarily a single mantra, but a sort of rhetoric that is a little bit more compassionate without being queasy or creepy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you can have an idea as well. I've had previous Cape Wrath client who created a kind of a character and a story that sat behind it around what she was going to be on the race. And so it was wider than a mantra, but it had key principles in it that then reflected what she was trying to do, why she was doing it, how she might react to things. And so that idea was her mantra. It didn't require words necessarily. It was the idea of that character, and she carried that with her. And she was in touch recently and said she's still using it. So,
and that's a nice one.
Yeah, so
it's like identity, wasn't it, Elanor?
Yeah.
It's like a race identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And our blog's out there somewhere. So about it. But yeah,
I'll link it in the chat. I know it's
nice one. It's a nice one.
Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't. You shouldn't have a mantra because everybody has a mantra. Doesn't make you a cool person. Doesn't make you not a cool person, I should say.
The one that I heard was actually, maybe mantra's not the right word, but it was like the miles will take care of themselves. And the person was saying like, when they were kind of in it, because it's such a long amount of time on your feet, they were kind of overthinking about like the next thing all the time, rather than just being in the moment and being like, okay, all I need to do is get to the next checkpoint or whatever it might be. It was kind of like, don't worry, the miles will take care of themselves, like you'll get there. And I thought it was quite a nice sentiment.
Yeah, and that's an example of where that encompasses the idea that they've been working on, which is, focus on what you're doing now. It's maybe about some goal setting in there as well, but really it's about taking the focus away from being what's ahead to what am I doing now. And that's what that person's maybe then working on, and they have that as a mantra to remind them to do that or to bring them back into the moment. That sort of side of things. But yeah.
That reminds
and also
me,
actually, a wee word of warning to people: don't copy other people's mantra because you think it sounds cool. Don't do that.
It kind of reminds me of I used to do quite a lot of cycle time trialing, and there was somebody out, and the thing that they suggested was the mantra was, can I go any faster? So I was constantly asking myself, can I go any faster? Which clearly sort of was quite painful a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
you don't necessarily want to have that one all the time.
Yeah. But if it makes sense, if you're somebody who tends to maybe ease off a little bit, then having a question like that might be really useful. Can I go fast? And again, I've used something very similar with client to go. Somebody who just would be a bit too comfortable. It's like, actually, you should be uncomfortable. Get out there. And can I be going quicker? Oh yeah, it turns out I can.
It's okay if the answer's no as well, though, surely.
Absolutely. Yeah, the answer is absolutely fine if it's no, but you need to make sure they were asking themselves. And ideally, the answer is no.
Does anybody have any final questions you want to drop in the chat? And I think we'll probably look to round it up soon. Unless, did you have another question, Ian?
I just thought it'd be nice to finish. We've talked a lot about goal setting and things pre-race. Do you ever recommend people do some sort of reflection afterwards, and how do you sort of structure that so that it's kind of constructive rather than just, oh, that was amazing or that was awful?
Yeah, I mean, if it's, oh, that was amazing, just leave it, that'll be fine. No, yeah, I would strongly recommend people have some sort of review session afterwards, either with themselves or with somebody else. You can do it with other runners or with one of us or something. But yeah, if you're doing it immediately after, you're unlikely to be able to really kind of get your head around it. You need a little bit of reflection time and a bit of recovery time. But particularly if you've done goal setting ahead of time, it's the bookend to that, to go, okay, how did I actually do on the goals that I had for the race? So rather than it being, oh, it's either brilliant or a disaster, it's probably somewhere in the middle of, well, what did I manage to do? What did I do well at? If you're planning on doing other things in the future, it's also the critical time to take that learning, because you will forget about it. Much though you might think this is the best thing I've ever done, it's the most amazing experience, I'm never going to forget it. You absolutely will forget the details of it. So, not least because you weren't sleeping during it, and therefore your brain literally hasn't had the time to create those memories. So yeah, do a review around that of, well, what went well? What do I want to learn from it? Even what didn't go so well, okay, that's fine. Would I do something different next time? What would I do the same is also quite a useful question to ask, so that you don't dismiss that and only focus on the things you want to change around it. That's kind of how I would do it.
Yeah, similar. I would just sort of do a race review. Sometimes it can be really helpful for people to actually write something themselves, actually write it down. Yeah, and you know, that can just be a useful process, you know, of sort of unraveling some of the experience, and taking stock of things that have happened. I think the key one that you mentioned there, Elanor, is if that's linked to then doing an other event. You know, if this is also part of a process, then it's definitely really valuable. If you've decided that you are never, ever, 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 ever going to do anything like this ever again, and that's it, switched off, then maybe not so much point in doing a race review.
See, I don't know, I would still say yes, because I would say you maybe made it look slightly different, so it's less about learning for doing another event, but it might be about, what am I going to take from that will help me in the rest of my life?
Yeah,
What am I
totally.
going to take from it? What confidence elements I'm going to capture in it? What did I do amazingly well that I can be totally chuffed for the rest of my life about? How am I going to memorize that? Or indeed, I feel really, really disappointed and I need a bit of time just to process that and have some help to process that, rather than have that disappointment bleed across everything else you ever do in the future. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
So it could take a different approach. It might be a kind of less practical things and more just a processing, compassion, sort of life lessons approach
Yeah.
to it. But I don't think it's less valuable. I think it just would have a different focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both for joining us. I hope everybody else agrees it's been a very insightful evening. And thanks to everyone else at home who's also who's took the time to dial in. We will be sharing a recording of the webinar afterwards. So if you follow us on socials, we'll put a link out there, and a link out to our email database as well. If you want to share it around, or someone else that you know might find it useful. But yeah, it's a bit of an abrupt end to the webinar because I literally just click end event and then it ends. But yeah, thanks for everyone for joining us, and yeah, we hope to see you at an event soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
very
for having us.
much. Thanks for having us.
you.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye.